Okay, before I get started and explain why there's bubble gum on the table, who's got a score for me tonight? Great, thank you for that. 6-2, if there's any positive updates, please feel free to yell them out. Oh, it's done. I've been so riveted. Oh. True Mariners fan over here, it's mid-7 and she's given up on the whole thing. I get it, I know, I get it. I've watched a lot of games. Okay, well then this will be right up your alley. If you are a baseball fan, then you know that bubble gum is part of the dugout, like every baseball dugout. Doesn't matter if you are little league or big leaguers. That's why you have gum on the table. If you see a table that does not have a bucket of bubble gum, Amazon literally cut me off. They did not know what I was doing, and they placed a limit on it. Could you share with the table next to you? Does everybody have gum? Everybody has gum. Okay, do me a favor and pick up one piece of gum. Now, here's what I want you to do with that one piece of gum. I want you to pretend like, why is there an empty wrapper at that table? What just happened there? Okay, pick up the one piece of gum. Now, I want you to pretend like you don't really want this one piece of gum, like somebody handed it to you, but you don't really want it. And I want you to find a place to stash that piece of gum. I bet you, what did you just say? No, say it. How many of you just shoved it in your bra? Yep. It's the best hiding place. If, however, you are not wearing a bra tonight, gentlemen, or if you have a jacket, perhaps you just shoved that piece of gum right in your pocket, right? And I promise that you're probably not going to think about that piece of gum again until you go to put the jacket back on. I know this from personal experience because for years, our pitching coach at the Mariners, Pete Woodworth, used to hand me a piece of gum on his way out to the bullpen. Now, here's the thing. He always walked past me as I was either getting ready to go on live TV or was actually on live TV. I did not want this piece of bubble gum, but I had to figure out where to put the bubble gum. I did not put it in my bra, in case you're wondering. It generally went into a pocket, and I never thought about it again, which is how I still find pieces of bubble gum in every single jacket I have ever worn. Now, here's what I want you to do. If you have a bucket, wait, why are there what is happening at this table? The lid is back on the bubble gum? No, we're gonna take the lid off, and what I want you to do is grab a handful of bubble gum. There's no right number of pieces, I just want you to grab a handful. They're so tidy over here, they just had the lid on it. This table has 2. Okay, so you've got what, 4, 5, 6 pieces, depending on the size of your hand, right? Right? Okay, you've got a handful of bubble gum. What are you gonna do with it? Why are people throwing bubble gum across the room? What just happened here? I should not be surprised about this, but somebody literally just said throw it. Would not be the worst thing I have been hit with during the course of my career. But if I said, you have a handful of bubble gum, find a place to hide it, where are you gonna put it? In the bra still, that's gonna be really uncomfortable in the next 20 minutes, gals. Here's what I know for sure. Who am I hiding it from? This is actually the better question, right? Here's what I know for sure. It doesn't matter where you put that gum. There is no way you are gonna take an entire handful and forget about that. Because whether it is when you go home tonight and take off your bra, or when you realize that there is this huge lump in your pocket, there is a handful of gum that you can't possibly forget about. Now, again, I speak from experience because if I was not wearing a jacket and Pete Woodworth handed me a piece of gum, I would put it in this makeup kit. Now, this is my sideline makeup kit. The only thing that is in this kit is a few lipsticks, some hairspray, and my IFB. Contents of this never changed. It has been the same for almost 19 years. which is why it was always really surprising and frustrating when I couldn't zip it up. And it would never fail, as I am frustratingly trying to get this thing closed, and I'm digging to the bottom of it. There's 4, 5, or 6 pieces of bubble gum at the bottom. When you hold one piece of bubble gum, it doesn't seem like very much. It's really small. It's easy to forget about. When you grab an entire handful, it's really hard to deny that that is a greater mass. And when I do this exercise with corporate clients, I will say this is proof of the compounding effect of doing a little, a lot. Because it is really easy to overlook, to forget, or to not believe that the habits that you are executing on every single day lead up to big things. I call this the bubblegum effect. And every piece of gum is a bubblegum moment. It is exactly how I can tell the story of my career. Now, I spent 19 years on the Mariners broadcast. And what most people remember me for on broadcast are moments like this. Now, I will assure you that in 19 seasons, this happened to me less than a dozen times. And J.P. Crawford is one of the few that could have gotten away with that without facing my wrath after the fact. And I think that's a pretty impressive number. Less than a dozen times of getting fully doused in 19 years. You want to know what's even more incredible? I have never once been hired to be on TV. From my very first job when I was in college until I left the broadcast 2 weeks ago, I have never held the title of reporter or anchor. I was hired to be a producer. Now, I went to school with the eye on being in front of the camera and being the person that brought you the stories. But as Heather demonstrated, it's really hard to get a job in TV. So I just took the first one that came my direction and thought, I will figure it out from here. Being a producer meant that I could create content that I knew was compelling and engaged audiences. But I just had this feeling that maybe I could be the person on the other side of the camera, bringing those stories to life. But there's no direct path from being a full-time producer to being a full-time TV reporter. So I imagined one. And that imagination really kicked in at about midnight every night when everybody went home. The 11:30 news ends at 11:35, and at midnight I was seated at my desk in the sports pit, imagining the broadcast I would have created. So I combed through all of the interviews that we had shot that day, and I'm editing my videos, and I'm trekking up to the voiceover booth, trying to make myself sound normal on a microphone, which takes a lot more practice than you would imagine. And then I would show the sports director and my mentor, Paul Sylvie, and I would get feedback. And I did this on a pretty weekly basis for about 7 years. And towards the end of that 7 years, I had done this so many times that I negotiated 60 seconds a week on TV. I was pretty proud of myself for that. Yep. And then I went to Root Sports because they needed a producer. And I thought, this will be a great new challenge. This will be really fun. So I go to Root Sports, and on the very first day, I walk in. This is after I've already accepted the job. And I said, look, King 5 and Northwest Cable News was giving me 60 seconds a week. Would you give me the same opportunity? There was a handshake agreement. I do not recommend it. Get your attorneys and your agents involved in this. And they said, yeah, sure, we'll give you a shot, whatever. Within 3 weeks, the same executive producer who had given me the handshake agreement and hired me came to me and said, hey, Jen, we are really in a bind here. We have got this one-off show that we need to get done, and we don't have anybody to do this. So what we need is somebody who can go and produce this show, but also be the reporter and also anchor this show. Do you think you can do this? I had never once done anything like that in my entire life. But I had 7 years of bubblegum moments that told me that I could. I did that show. I never looked back. I don't think most of my colleagues know that I was never hired to be on TV. because it turned into 19 years as part of the Mariners television broadcast and really fun stories to tell about Gatorade baths. Now, Gatorade baths are a whole celebration all to themselves, but there is nothing like being on the sidelines of an NFL game on game day. It is crazy. These guys are big, fast, strong, explosive, and then you have moments like these. So this is Doug Baldwin and Jermaine Kearse. Jermaine Kearse had just caught the game-winning touchdown pass against Green Bay that sent us back to the Super Bowl. Do you remember this? Now, if you remember that game, you know that the last 2 minutes of regulation were off-the-wall nuts. Like, nobody has ever done anything like that before or since. You want to know the crazier thing about this picture? I never applied to be the sideline reporter for the Seahawks. I did, however, tell the director of broadcasting in 2003 that if the job of sideline reporter ever came open, I would really like the chance to audition. And then I showed up everywhere he looked. I showed up at practices, I showed up at press conferences, I showed up at games. I spent vacation days to travel with my King 5 crew to Cheney, Washington, where they held training camp, to pretend like it was my job to be the reporter on site. That is not, by the way, how they teach you to do it in school, and please don't do that. It's called stalking if you don't have a media credential. But because I was a producer and had taken that job, I had some opportunities. I did that for 6 years. And in 2009, the same director of broadcasting comes to me and he says, "Hey, Jen, the job of sideline reporter is open. Would you like to audition?" And I said, of course I would. So I did one preseason game and I earned the job. And it's not because I was so awesome in a preseason game. It's a preseason game. It's because there were 6 years of bubblegum moments leading up to that. I already knew how to have the conversation. I had built the relationship. They were familiar with me. It was an untraditional way to get from point A to point B, but quite honestly, I didn't know what else to do. And I had no idea if this plan was going to work because they don't take attendance at training camp or at practice. And they're not tracking who shows up for a press conference or who is asking questions. But I always felt it was better to work towards a goal than to hope that that opportunity was going to come to me. There is a song called "Fear is a Liar." And it's a Christian song. It's by Zach Williams. And it is a song that I love in any season of life. But it's a song that I've listened to on repeat over the last 2 years during big seasons of change. And I think that's often when we think about fear. When you decide to leave a job, start a business, leave a marriage, when you decide that you are going to move across the country or around the world, and you just don't know what's going to happen. There's those moments where, yes, they are fear-inducing, but to me, it's the small moments that are far more prevalent and, quite honestly, more hurtful and distracting during the course of the day. Because we know the fear of working hard but wondering if somebody's paying attention. We know what it's like to sacrifice time with our family to try to complete that project early. And you don't know if it actually matters. You want to believe that the little moments are adding up, but there's this fear that one day the only thing you are going to be doing is picking up pieces of bubble gum off the floor. I know. I've been there. I feel you. I know what it's like to wake up at 5:45, to make sure that you are at your computer by 6 o'clock, so that you can sit there in the quiet of your office and pretend to be the voice of the Seahawks. I know the number of times I questioned, wouldn't I have rather stayed in bed? But I also know the feeling of walking into the broadcast booth at Lambeau Field, putting the headset on, and being the voice of the Seahawks for one quarter of one preseason game. And it is freaking awesome. 4 years of bubblegum moments led to the opportunity. And I knew that I was prepared. I was unprepared for the feedback that I got afterwards. For the folks who said, "You sound like such a natural." Meanwhile, I'm just laughing, thinking, you have no idea how many hours I have spent by myself hoping that any of this paid off and resulted in something bigger. One piece of bubble gum doesn't seem like very much, but a handful adds up to something bigger than you could imagine. Here's the thing about bubblegum moments, though. Most of them, they don't rate on anybody else's scale. So you are going to have to be really good at identifying what they are and talking about them. This is one of the slides, one of the cards from a deck that I have available that I just created, where one side is conversation strategies to make sure that you are truly showcasing your brilliance. The other side is conversation starters, so that you can build all the relationships you need to be your brilliant self. And when it comes to talking about your success, while it might be more natural to shy away, here's what I will tell you. There are people who want to cheer for you. We see it all the time in sports. They just need to know what they're cheering for. And it's up to you to identify and talk about your bubblegum moments. And I promise you are not counting as many of those moments as you should be. In the 2 weeks that it's been since I announced that I was leaving the Mariners broadcast team, I have read and I hope acknowledged the hundreds of messages that I have received. And they have been very touching, and I am very grateful. And I'm going to be in a lot more stages like this. That's what I'm going to be doing. But what's really unique about leaving a job and having people talk to you and tell you about the job that you did is that you now have that compounding effect of the impact that you have made. And there were 3 themes that came up over and over and over again in these hundreds of messages. And the first one was, you showed up. And it sounded like this. We knew, we tuned in every single night and we could see you. I didn't think about it. You just show up because it's your job. But to somebody else, it's a bubblegum moment. The next thing they said was, your smile and your energy was awesome. We could tell because it looked like you were having fun, and the guys looked like they were having fun when they talked to you. Of course I was having fun. I loved my job. I still love my job. I didn't think twice about smiling, but somebody else noticed it. It was a bubblegum moment I overlooked, but it impacted somebody else. And the third thing they said was, you said hi to me. I waved at you from the stands, or I yelled your name, and you waved back, and you said hi. I can't imagine not saying hi. To me, it's what you do. To somebody else, it had a huge impact. So when you think about your bubblegum moments, I know that you are already showing up. I know that you are showing up with a smile and with joy and the desire to help people. And I know that you are doing things like saying hi that you don't think twice about, that have a much bigger impact than you would think. So when you are right in the middle of it and you want to know if it matters, I hope you have a handful of bubble gum on your desk to remind you that it does.